I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Janis Robinson Daly. Janis is the author of the historical novel The Unlocked Path. A genealogy search helped her discover her great-great-grandfather was a founder of the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania, and this led Janis down the path of unearthing the stories of women whose lives have remained in the shadows. With a love of history, she balances a need for authenticity and details with a fictional flair. Janis, her husband, and rescue pup travel between New Hampshire, Cape Cod, and Florida. Welcome to the show, Janis.
Thank you so much for having me today, Kara. Look forward to chatting to you all about things book.
Yes, who doesn't love to talk about books? Well, I'm glad you could make it today. Thank you very much. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about who you are?
I am a first-time novelist
Okay.
at a ripe old age. Let's just say north of 50, quite a bit north of 50, and never started out wanting to be a writer.
Okay.
I wasn't one of those people that, since the childhood, I had written stories and always dreamed of being a New York Times bestseller author. It was truly this discovery during genealogy research that I felt like there's a story here about the women who graduated from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania. Their story needed to be told.
Yeah.
So if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? So coming up on 6 years ago now, I set down the path of learning more, researching more, and then put my hands to a keyboard and get started.
Wow, I love that. And I know from reading your bio and talking with you a little bit, this wasn't your first career.
Oh
And,
no.
and was with your previous career, did you do writing within that?
So I've spent my entire career in sales and marketing.
Okay.
So writing, yes, but business writing, strategic plans for marketing, documents like that, but not creative writing in any.
Sure. Did you find that any of that translated?
Well, probably to a detriment.
Okay.
It was more of a straightforward, like I wanted to write in bullet points. Well, you can't write a novel with bullet
Yeah.
points. So, at least it did help me to learn how to be succinct and not be too overly poetic, if you will. So trying to stay to the point, I guess, did help a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's great. Because I feel like as we go through life, right, we pick up these lessons and what we might think that doesn't translate into what we're doing next. There is some little part of us, right? We work so long and so hard at a different technique. Or I always say that I was a physical therapist before I started staying home with my kids and venturing into this world of podcasting. But I think interviewing my patients has really helped me in doing this venture because it's interviewing people as well and maybe in a different facet, but it has translated very nicely.
That's great. Great.
So, all right. Well, I have you always been a reader?
I have always been a reader.
Okay.
Absolutely. So, from a very young age, I was always reading, outside of school, beyond school assignments. I have very fond memories of going to the library as a child, my mom taking me to story hours and all. And I can still see in my head, our hometown library, which I'm speaking at in 2 weeks. So that's very exciting.
Oh
Um,
my goodness, that's
so it,
amazing.
right through, high school, always had a book going. I have to admit, and you can probably relate to this, Kara. Once you have kids, though, your leisure time is there leisure time? There's never leisure time. So I did put a small pause, unfortunately, I think, on my reading until I found a book club for women
Okay.
in my town
Yeah.
and made the decision. My kids were, probably preschool age. You know what? One night a month for
Yeah.
2 hours and, a couple of hours in the weeks leading up to that to get a book read is going to be me time. And I'm
Yeah.
going to do something that I love, which is reading. So got back into that. I think our anniversary is coming up on our 25 years together, the
Oh
core
my
group.
goodness. Wow, that's amazing. I feel like that is so important. What you're saying is finding an avenue that can fit within your life, right? Mama, stay-at-home dads, if you're listening, like finding that you can find something for you a little bit that you're passionate about. Um and that's my husband's in the military, and so we move a lot. And I actually use book clubs to help me integrate into the new community that
Wonderful.
we've moved to, because I feel like finding the fellowship of that group and people that are you can go into that in a cold conversation, right? Because you know you're going to talk about the book. So it's not going to be this maybe stilted, quote unquote, conversation if you maybe don't hit it off right away, because you're going to have something of a common ground to talk about. But that's amazing for you to have one that you've been with this group of women for 25 years.
Yeah.
That's
Some
incredible.
have come and gone, and some of us, like myself, have actually moved from the town. I'm an hour away
Okay.
now. I still try to get back,
Yeah.
uh, to reconnect with those women, and they've been incredibly supportive,
Yeah.
of my reading too.
How do you find, or do you guys suggest books for the book club that you're reading, or how do you guys do that for your
Yeah,
picks?
I've become quite involved in book clubs, and we are a fly by the seat of our pants. I guess none of us are planners. So it's we choose the book each month, and we let the hostess choose the book.
Okay. Oh, that's a great idea.
Rotate. But we'll put a couple of suggestions out to see how many have already read it or haven't read it to get a balance. So people
Yeah.
have already read it, then they can take a breather that month. But it also introduces you to books you would never have chosen on your own.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's the beauty of it, right? It's like I would trod, down one path, but I think that when you have other people giving input, it's such a great way to expand your reading horizons, as you will. Well, that's so fun. And then what, if you were reading, what type of books would you like to pick up? What genres do you enjoy?
Yeah. So, well, of course, my favorite is historical fiction.
Okay.
Uh, so I absolutely love learning about history that we never heard in our textbooks in school. It's
Yeah.
so regimented in what's being taught. And there's so much more that you can't cram into, what is it, 180 days of school? There's
Yeah.
no so there's just so much more to learn about and places to travel to, that, I'll probably never get to,
Yeah.
play some of those places in my life. So definitely historical fiction, where it's, a deeper read than a nonfiction book on a topic. You really can feel like the author has done a good job of making those characters come to life and more relatable.
Yeah.
So historical fiction, and I do enjoy memoirs as
Okay.
well of famous people and
Yep.
maybe famous people, but again, to kind of understand their lives and what they've lived through and their challenges of life and see how any of that could be related to my own.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can learn from all of that, right? Because we're, like you said, we're not going to have lived that path of their life. And
Right.
so when we read about others, it gives us an opportunity to experience something that we haven't been through in our own. So,
And a nice sense of empathy of trying to understand their viewpoints and
yeah,
perspectives.
absolutely. So now in your life, how do you find time to read? When do you fit it in?
Um, I'm God bless you, Kara. I don't know how you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast. So I've never been a morning person. So my reading is mostly at night, before I'm going to bed, or on weekends during the day a little bit, and traveling.
Yeah.
I have found, you mentioned my husband and I travel a lot, kind of remote work of different locations, but Audible has been a lifesaver.
Hmm.
Has allowed me so much more of my to be read pile to pull it down a little bit. And I even now, if I know I'm going out in my car, even going somewhere shopping or errands or whatever, and I know I'm going to be in a car for more than 20 minutes at a time, I'll throw on my book that's
Yeah.
on off, so I can get through a chapter, in that 20 minutes or so.
Yeah. And that's what I always say. Audiobooks saved my reading life because that's how I fit it in with mothering. So
And
when I'm
walking.
folding, yeah, walking, folding laundry, doing the dishes, I can have a story in. And trust me, I clean so much more when I've got a story in my ears. I'm more motivated to do
I
that.
want to walk a little bit further because I want to get to the end of the chapter. Yeah.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. And then I was going to ask you that. So as you travel, do you do mostly Audible or do you bring books with you? Do you have a Kindle? How do you do that?
I have the Kindle app on my
Okay.
tablet, but I can't read in a car.
Yeah, I cannot either.
I get nauseous. I wish I could because I feel like that's a lot of downtime. So when my husband and I are traveling, we have to pick a book that we both are interested, and
Yeah.
we don't always have the same interests. So we always have to put together a couple of different choices, and then we discuss them and say, okay, which one are we going to pop on? Um, but when we're not listening to that, or he's taking a nap while I'm driving, I'm kind of sitting there like, well, this is wasted time. I should be
Yeah.
listening. But yeah.
My son can read in the back, and he's
Yeah.
7. And he can read in the back of the van, and he'll pour through. We'll go to the library. And now I'm smart enough. I get him like 4 chapter books at a time because he'll like pour through one, and we'll get home, and I'm like, we just left the library. Like, well, I already finished it. I'm like, how? Like,
That's wonderful. That's
that I'm
wonderful.
so impressed by his skill to be able to read in the car because I have never been able to do that myself. So I had a friend recommend that she said if you hold the book up so it's like on the horizon versus down, she's like that might help with your like because then the stuff passing by is more level.
Hmm.
I've never tried it, so I don't know. I'm usually driving, but might be something worth trying, listeners. Okay. And then, so today you have so graciously prepared us a book flight of books. And do you want to tell us how they all kind of tie together?
Sure. So the three books that I chose, of course, are my favorite genre, historical fiction, where I am carried away to different times and places. And the three, well, of course, I have to mention my book, The Unlocked
Yes.
Path, and the other two are pretty diverse in their locations. The Red Tent by Anita Diamant is, an imagined story of Dinah, the daughter of,
Okay.
yep, so set in biblical times, the book of Genesis. Usually the story is focused on Jacob and his sons, but he did have a daughter, Dinah, and 4 wives. So the Red Tent, and then the other book is The Island of Sea Women by Lisa C. And Lisa C is one of my favorite authors. She writes about Asian women's stories, mostly historical fiction. And that one is set on Jeju Island in South Korea during the 1930s and 40s. So a very tumultuous time, of course, in that part of the world and
Yeah.
our lives with 1930s, the Japanese invasions in the Pacific, and then leading up to World War II. And then the Unlocked Path, my book is set mostly in Philadelphia at the turn of the 20th century. And all three books have that common thread of strong women communities.
Yeah.
So not just a strong female protagonist, which is present in many, many books
Sure. Yeah.
across genres, but it's the idea of a collective community of women coming together. So in the Red Tent, the wives of Jacob and the mothers, if you will, to Dinah, come together once a month in the Red Tent.
Yeah.
You can imagine what's going on during those 3 or 4 days that they're in the Red Tent for women. And it's just where they come together and they support each other and they teach Dinah the life and trials and challenges that are going to lie ahead for her as a woman
Yeah.
during those times, and how they support each other.
And I
So
think that I read this book. I'm trying to think. It was probably 2017, 2018 when I read it. And I was like I had younger kids at the time and I was a younger mother. And I just remember thinking, I wish there was a community like that still.
absolutely. And this was one of the first choices of my book club.
Okay.
And at when we're sitting there around discussing it, we're like, we wish there was a red tent for us today. And then we said, well, you know what? Our book club is kind of this.
Yeah.
Once, granted, it's only 2 hours instead of 3 or 4 days, but in a way, the concept of the red tent is alive and well within book clubs for women.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful story, listeners, if you haven't read it. So,
And then Island of Sea Women is a matriarchal society
yeah,
that
I
still
found that very interesting.
still exists today. The women of Jeju Island uh, are the breadwinners.
Yeah.
So they are divers without tanks.
Yeah.
I mean, if you read the book, it's absolutely amazing. Without scuba gear, they are diving and harvesting, sea life, and bringing it up and selling it, and all and the trade that goes on with it. And the men are staying home with the children.
Yeah.
And again, there's the friendships and sisterhood that develops between the two main characters, Mija and Young Suk. They're friends, but how can friendships fragment, based on life situations, but still come together and care for each other. So it's a beautiful story, as Lisa C. always writes beautiful stories about women relationships. And again, in a totally different part of the world. I
Yeah.
don't know that I will ever, get a trip into Asia in my life. But the way she writes with such detail, you could feel like you're there, and you could feel like you're in the frigid waters, and that you're, having, those moments of diving, and this, the depth sickness and all that ensues. So incredible story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When I read this, and I think Lisa C., I'm thinking back to post graduate school days was when I kind of got back into my reading life. And that's when I started liking historical fiction. And I feel like Lisa C. and Ken Follett were the two that I read that I was like, oh, I love this genre of historical fiction. And for exactly what you said, I could transport to different places, to different times. And I think it makes history relatable, which I don't think our history textbooks did. No offense to the history book textbook writers out there or my teachers. I just think in story form, it makes it seem like I'm in the story and I can relate to it. And Lisa C., oh my goodness, man, I feel like her stories just tug at your heartstrings. There is so much, because you get so invested in the characters that she's writing about. There's this huge emotional component as they venture through their story. And so I've always been very invested in her books when I've read them.
Well, I'll give a plug for Lisa, because I do admire her so much. She has a new book coming out in 2 weeks.
Oh,
Lady Tan's Circle of Women,
okay.
which is incredible, because there's many parallels with my book. So I'm kind of honored that she ended up writing something similar to mine. It's about a woman doctor.
Okay.
And it's set in China in the 1500s,
All right.
based on the real existence of a woman doctor back then, not just a healer,
Wow.
but a doctor. And she's going on tour, which,
Okay.
now that we have passed, hopefully, the ability to now have in-person events and all. So I've already got my ticket to see her in Massachusetts. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a great bookstore here in San Diego that brings authors through, and actually that's how I had heard of you, Janice. I wanted to tell the listeners is you have a great Instagram account, And you had, well, I had went to the Adventures by the book bingo. We'll throw them a little plug. And you were one of the guests, and I heard about your story, and I was so pulled into it, being a physical therapist. I mean, I didn't go to quote unquote medical school, but something in the same vein. And I was so intrigued by your story that I started following you on Instagram right after that and got your book on Audible, which was so fantastic. I want to talk to you about that too before we're done. Um, but and then I started following you on Instagram, and you did that month, I believe it was in March, about historical fiction. And every day you featured a different book on historical fiction. And since that is like my jam, I was just loving all that you did there. So, listeners, I'll put the link for Janis's Instagram in the show notes so you can follow her there.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was March's Women's History Month.
Yeah.
So I put together a list of 31 titles of, I wanted fiction, historical fiction.
Yeah.
Because again, I think it will reach a broader audience.
Yeah.
And people can learn about real women in history whose stories haven't been told, or collective women. So Island of Sea Women was on my list. And 30 others, including my own. But it was wonderful, and the response I got from all the other authors that I featured, they were all very, very supportive, and they helped share out the hashtag and some of the other books that we're spotlighting. So I'm already starting a list for next year to come up with another 31.
Oh, that'll be so fun. I like put so many books on my TBR list because as much as I love historical fiction, I mean, there's just no way to know all the books that are out there, right? There's so a plethora of books, and they're all fantastic stories. So I'll be looking for it for sure, because I feel like I'd love to have a trusted source or, a trusted recommendation of a book.
Great. Yeah. And I even did the presentation at a couple of libraries. So I hope to expand that next year as well. And hopefully some of them will be on over Zoom so more people can
Oh,
watch
that
it.
would be great. I'll watch for that too. Well, I would love to talk a little bit more about your book. Can you tell us the story of how you kind of, briefly talked about it, but dive a little bit deeper and tell us about this genealogy search that you did and what it stemmed from there.
So, I'm at the other end of my life, Kara, as a mother than you. So 6 years ago, my youngest was getting ready to graduate college, and just popped up on my memories yesterday that it was his graduation.
So fun.
6 years ago, my baby. And even though I was working full time, I was like, what now? What am I going to do with my life? Because both my boys were very involved in sports and even both played at the collegiate level, so we were still involved.
Yeah.
Going to watch their games and traveling from Massachusetts to Pennsylvania for both of them, and so that took up a lot of time. But then I'm like, well, now what am I going to do? If I'm not going to a football game every Saturday for 10 weeks in the fall,
Yeah.
what? So, lots of folks will, get active and pick up Pilates or pickleball or golf or tennis racket. And, I find a way to keep my ass in the chair. and decided to finally research my grandmother Robinson's family, who I didn't really know a lot about. My grandmother had passed before I was born. My dad passed when I was 29, so still fairly young, and never asked the questions of the mysteries of her life.
We don't have the foresight, right, to do that at that age. Mm-hmm.
And I tell people, ask the questions of those older generations, so you can learn. So, I'm researching her, and I'm not finding a lot. Because she didn't work outside the home. She apparently wasn't involved in many organizations. But I did find her grandfather, so my great-great-grandfather, I found his name because there was a lot about him as a lawyer and judge in the 1800s in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And not only learned he was involved in the abolitionist movement, which I thought was very cool.
Yeah, wow.
He defended runaway slaves and their freedom in the 1850s. But he was a founder of the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And what? There were Women's Medical College? Never had heard of such a thing. I went to a women's college myself at the time. Wheaton
Okay.
College, Massachusetts was women, has since gone co-ed, but I was immediately drawn to that idea again of women coming together and supporting each other and what they faced in their desire of wanting to study medicine. Because in the 1800s, women, there weren't even many colleges, let alone medical colleges that
Absolutely.
so to know that I had an ancestor involved in believing in not only the rights of the African Americans, the slaves, and their rights to freedom, but believing in the rights for women to be educated
Yeah.
and for them to follow their desires of wanting to study and practice medicine as a doctor. And that was the difference
Yeah.
because of course women have been healers and midwives forever,
Yeah.
but it was an accredited degree that would give them the right to call themselves a doctor.
He
That was
sounds like
making.
an incredible man.
I know. I wish I had known him.
Yeah.
But I learned enough through all of my research that I felt like I do know him. Even found a portrait of him online because it's at the Harvard Law Library archives there.
Okay.
That
Wow.
was you actually see what he looked like. But then the story idea just started to form. And I was thinking, what these women went through, and some of the women that I was meeting in the research that I was really thinking, wow, they were incredibly accomplished women.
Yeah.
Women that went to France during World War One as surgeons and doctors and nurses, and women that became bacteriologists, studying diphtheria and some of our vaccine works, came from women, doctors and researchers. And I thought their stories need to be told and they
Yeah.
need to be celebrated. So I'm going to write a book.
Yes. Did your family look at you like, wait, what are you gonna do?
Not so much. I have to say they were very supportive. My sons and my husband. I think they were probably glad that I had found something to do instead of moping around,
Yeah.
ruining that. Oh, my life as a sports mom are over. No, I've got
Yeah.
something new to occupy my time.
Yeah. Okay. So from there, so then did you start I'm assuming you dug into doing research and how you were going to write this.
Yeah, so a lot of research, a lot of online research. Thankfully, I don't know how people wrote any historical novels before Google.
Absolutely.
So yeah, a lot of online research. I was very fortunate. I got down to Philadelphia, so where the
Okay.
school was founded, and the women's medical was the longest running women's only medical school from
Wow.
1850 to 1970 before
Wow.
to admit men in
Okay.
1970 and changed their name to just Medical College of
Okay.
Pennsylvania.
So it's still
And then
there
eventually,
then.
eventually merged with Drexel
Oh,
University.
okay. All right.
And so Drexel has all the archives. And so I was able to spend a day in their basement office with the archives
Wow.
and incredible, interesting pieces and photos and documents and correspondence and all. So that was an incredible day for me to see all of those firsthand, resource materials.
Yeah, and then so you're taking notes as you're going along, and how long, I'm imagining this was a very long research period. How long did you spend doing that?
So between research and writing was 3 years.
Wow.
So, because I would then get started on writing and then I'd have to pause and research something else.
Okay.
It was like, okay, well, wait a minute. It's 1912 and I'm having my main character receive a phone call. I think the phone had been invented, but how common would it be to have a phone in a household?
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know so a family of maybe more upper class stature, very logical they
Sure.
might have. So that was okay. I could then continue writing the scene because I had validated that it was plausible. So
Yeah.
things would sidetrack me, or I'd learn something new and then I'd want to throw that in. How do I throw in that interesting tidbit, and making sure that it adds to the story, not slows it down.
Yeah, I imagine it's like fitting the pieces of the puzzle together too, like you said. And I am so impressed that you can take 3 years worth of work and digest it down into this beautiful story. That's very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a labor of love for sure.
Yeah, and then I know obviously I listened to your book on Audible, which I thank you for having it on Audible. It what was
Thank
the
you
pro
to Patty Shade, my narrator, and Beacon Audiobooks, because they took on that project, and
Yeah.
I'm thrilled they picked it up.
Well, that was how I was going to ask you is how do you get it from going into print form because into audiobooks? And I know not all books are made obviously into audiobooks. So how does that happen? What's that process like?
So honestly, a little bit of a surprise. I am published through Black Rose Writing, which is
Okay.
a smaller independent press, and they use a print-on-demand service. So for the paperback, they only print it as orders come in,
Oh, okay.
which is smart. I think, it's not wasteful in any way,
Hmm.
printing thousands of copies that, a first-time author, they may never sell.
Yeah, and you're
So
not don't have to have them sitting around your house.
exactly, yeah, you're making new bookcases out of them. So uh, Black Rose, kind of puts, I believe, selects certain titles and then just kind of puts them out there in a, I don't know, not really an auction place, but like a resource directory of, some titles that are available. And narrators and audio production firms kind of review them,
Okay.
and then they'll pick them up if they're interested.
Wow. Okay.
I didn't honestly even know right away that it had been picked up and was being made into an audiobook, and until it was well underway, and production was well underway. But I am thrilled.
Yeah.
Uh, so I didn't get to pick the narrator in any way, but I am thrilled. Patty Shade again did the narration. I think she did a great job. And it wasn't until I sat and listened to it myself, I've read it out loud, but to hear
Sure.
someone else read it out loud, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I have male and female characters. I have adults and I have children, little girls, little boys.
Yeah.
I have characters with an Italian accent, with an Irish accent, with an Indian accent, with a Russian accent.
Yes.
So I wasn't thinking about the audio version when I was writing this and what kind of challenges that might present. But again, Patty does all the narration, and I think she did a great job.
Yeah, yeah, it was great through audiobook. So I can't say I've read it through print, but it's fantastic, listeners. You should go listen to it. And I don't think out of all my reading, and by no means am I level expert at this, but I've, like you said, read a book about a women doctor. It's like you said, it's been in the form of midwives or in the form of healers or nurses during World War II, but never as a physician.
Yeah. And based on real people.
Yeah.
Um, there are a few books out there now about women doctors, but with the exception, I think, of the one Lisa C is coming out with, most of them have been completely fictional and not
Okay.
really real people. So my main character is a fictionalized character, but she's a composite character inspired
Okay.
by all my research. But I do have three real women that appear in the book
Yeah.
as secondary characters.
And that was really fun to learn about after I had read it to see which ones, oh, that's impressive, because then you know their story and you're kind of attached to them a little bit. And then to hear they're real people, that was really fun. What, so now you have all your research. Sorry, we jumped ahead to audiobook, but when then you sit down to do this creative writing. How was that process?
That was challenging, and the first drafts were rough and horrible. So I did take a creative writing class online
Okay.
to start to understand, what I needed to do, what I needed to make sure I included, building that tension, building those points in the story where we might have twists and turns to make it interesting. What struggles would my characters overcome? Because we always want to read about, characters overcoming different challenges. dialogue, how to write a very, dialogue that sounds natural.
Yeah.
So I did take a creative writing class, and I used a couple of the assignments that we had for prompts each week, as ideas for the book. So
Okay.
I was able to look back at them. And then just sat down and started to close my eyes and envision a scene and let the words flow. But as I said, they were pretty bad
Yeah.
the first few drafts. And I'm fortunate that one of my brothers, he was the English major in college. So he took the first draft for me, and I gave him a box of red pens and a bottle of red wine. And I said, "I had it. You've never spared your words and telling me what to do as the older brother. So tell me what to do with this
Well, that's,
story."
you had a good resource to go to, right? Not someone that would just be, oh, it's great, right? And brush over it.
No, he there was a lot of red pen on those pages.
Oh, that's so amazing to have that as a resource. That's so great. Okay. And then how long did this writing process take you?
So 3 years for the research and the writing and the editing. I did after my free services for my brother, I did hire a professional editor,
Sure.
a line editor. So she worked with me to, strengthen some parts even further, or add in some things, or take out some things, because I wanted this story to get published, and I
Yeah.
felt like I need a quality product, and I didn't want to self-publish. I really wanted to try to get a publisher to pick it up. So I felt like the investment of working with a professional editor was well worth it, and then worked with a copy editor as well,
Yeah.
to check my grammar, because I wasn't the English major in my business writing and all. You don't need to be grammatically correct when you're writing in bullet points on a PowerPoint. So definitely, that all took 3 years, and then it took me another year to find a publisher, and then
Wow.
had to get onto their publishing schedule. They were almost a year out
Okay.
of a slot open. Yeah.
Wow. Your perseverance of spirit is incredible. Kudos to you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I can't imagine the ups and downs of the emotions going through that.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was, it was like going to a sports game. You're ahead, and now
Yeah.
you're behind, and now it's tied, and now, oh God, now your son's up at the bat, and there are two outs, and yeah. So
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I know now from following you on Instagram that you have some other ideas to go forward.
absolutely. So, in addition to my creative writing course I took, went to a couple of writers' conferences,
Okay.
which were helpful. And my original plan for the book was to follow the life of my fictional character for about a 50-year span.
Okay.
So when she's entering medical school, and then as she's getting ready to retire almost 50 years later. Um, and one of the best pieces of advice I got from some agents and editors at a conference was, that's too long of a period of history
Okay.
for a first time writer, because you're not going to do justice to that amount of history of
Yeah.
1897 to 1957 in a 350 page book.
Yeah.
So, and no one's going to read a 900-page book from a first time author. They're not going to invest their time and their money of what books cost these days. So, find a logical stopping point and cut the book off and set your readers up for a sequel.
Okay.
That's what I did. So now I'm working on a sequel that will we're going to pick up in the Depression, because again, people want to learn about and read
Yeah.
about strife and challenges. They don't want to read about happy days of the Roaring '20s.
Sure.
So we'll pick up in the Depression, and then be able to cover World War II, and what were the health issues being faced by women and citizens during the 30s and 40s and early 50s. Because there was so much history covered in The Unlocked Path with World War I and the Spanish flu and sinking
Yeah.
of the Titanic and the suffrage movement. So there's more history to explore now with the sequel.
Yeah. And that helped for me, again, like history is kind of foggy in the brain, right, from school, but to put it in order of events, right? Because it was through the pages of the story. So it helped reiterate the timeline of events in my mind. So it was really good for that.
And that was helpful for me to direct the story because I had anchors
Yeah.
of where I needed to go and of what do I need to have happen that would be relevant if I wanted to mention the sinking of the Titanic. Well, how could I bring that into the story that
Yeah.
would make sense?
Yeah. And then I saw also on your Instagram that is it your local library that has your book on the
Oh, yes, many
shelves?
libraries actually.
Okay.
I'm thrilled that I think last check that's over 20 library systems around the country
Oh,
have
yay.
the book. And a few of them have even bought multiple copies and have put together a book club in a bag
Oh, so
so that
fun.
area book clubs can, all check out the book from their library.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm really excited about that because it is a great choice for book clubs. There's a lot to discuss about women's issues and women's health issues and
Yes.
the parallels of the past, what's, still going on today that was being faced, over 100 years ago.
Yeah. And so did you have to do promotions to the libraries as well, or how does that work? How do they pick up books and figure out what they're going to put on their shelves?
So a few in Massachusetts, yes, it was from my outreach,
Okay.
and I have been doing library presentations that I talk about the genealogy research because libraries, are a great resource for
True.
anybody doing genealogy research, and some of them even have like little genealogy clubs and all. So I've taken the story and put it into a PowerPoint, which I know how to do,
Yeah.
and done the talk at over 25 libraries in Massachusetts and kind of as I've traveled around. But otherwise, I think it's just word of mouth, or librarians will check out Goodreads, and see something that catches their eye. Historical fiction is very popular right now,
Yeah.
and especially for uh, my audience, it seems like slightly older women
Hmm.
like myself that want to learn about
Yeah.
the past. And so libraries, a lot of their patrons are that type of an audience. So historical fiction is very hot
Yeah.
at libraries right now. And some of them even have historical fiction book clubs, that only read historical
Oh,
fiction.
fun.
And then I've had folks that I've just met through social media have recommended the book to their library, which has been
Yeah.
great.
That's why I'm like thinking, I'm like, oh, I need to get in a librarian on the show. I have not interviewed a librarian yet. So I'm like,
Yeah,
I'd love
I've
to
got
speak
a
to
few
some.
resources.
Yeah,
We'll
well, if
connect.
we can talk on the side, but if you have someone you think would be great, I would love that. So, because I think they'd be so interesting to talk to.
Yes,
So,
definitely. And how do they choose books? Because their budgets are limited,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, wow, but that's amazing for you that so many systems have picked it up. Hopefully, that's only going to keep the snowball going forward for you.
Right. I hope so. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, is there anything else you'd like to add about your book?
Just, I really feel like it's a great story. I'm thrilled with the reviews that have been coming in, and the presence that it's getting, and I am available to join book clubs for
Okay.
discussion over Zoom or in
Okay.
person. I travel all over the place.
Yeah.
I am listed, as you mentioned, with Novel Network and Adventures by the Book.
Yes.
People can look me up on their websites. And yeah, I just am loving the story. I absolutely love all the characters. And now I'm getting to meet them again in the
Yes.
sequel, and meet some other women doctors and some of the incredible work they were doing through the American Women's Hospital, which makes a brief appearance and mention in book one, but is going to have a stronger presence in book two.
Okay, well, I'll be looking forward to it. And listeners, I will include all the links to find Janis on the show notes so you can click that. And that's such a great idea for book clubs. I had never heard of that being an option because I'm part of like a nationwide book club. And so they send out the book list at the beginning of the year and it's set with like the school year parameters as far as our time frame. And um, And that's how I've met people as we've moved around, because I know it's this nationwide book club, but we've never had authors come speak. And I didn't even know that that was an option. So that's such a great thing. Because for me, I'll admit I don't watch much television. So authors to me are like celebrities, because this is what I do in my free time to escape.
I'm like a groupie. Some of my friends like, you're like a Lisa C. groupie, or one of my other favorite authors, totally different genre, but he's Boston based and writes Boston based, is Dennis Lehane, and he's just a new one. So Mystic River, is more famous. Yeah,
I've heard of that one. Okay, well, thank you so much for this book flight today on communities of strong women. I'm going to recap the books here real quick. So we have The Unlocked Path by Janis Robinson Daly. We have The Red Tent by Anita Diamant. And then we have The Island of Sea Women by Lisa C. And I actually, because I have read quite a bit of historical fiction myself, I don't always give a dessert pairing, but I feel like I have a book I could offer you. And I'm wondering, I have two pulled up, just in case you've read one of them, because I'm sure you're a prolific reader as well. Have you read In This House of Breed by Rumer Godin?
Oh, but I'm writing that one down.
Okay, I think this would actually fit the bill better for our book flight today, because it is actually set in a Benedictine nun community. And it's this highly successful woman that decides she wants to enter this Benedictine community. And so I think it fits the bill because it has more of the strong women community and what she goes through. And the friendships that are made within this novel, you will just fall in love with the characters.
Oh, I heard of it. And who is the author again?
It's Rumer Godin. So I can send that to you, and I'll have it in the show notes as well. But she was pretty much in the London elite, this highly successful class. And I want to say it was set in the early 1900s. I can't quote the year right now off the top of my head. But she enters the Benedictine convent, and we are not told why. But through the course of the pages, you kind of start to learn her story and the shock of her entering this religious life, right? And what she, as a highly successful woman, and what she's going through to change to fit into that. But you start to, there's this little bit of mystery about, well, why did she enter? And she had all this money and she had all these things, but why is she here now? And so there's this bit of intrigue that goes on in through the book as well, because you're trying to figure out, her story.
Sounds fascinating.
I just love the characters. We read this for our book club, and it was the best book we read all year, I thought, personally. And just, again, the women friendships and the community. So I think it would be the perfect fit for our episode today. So
I'm going to look it up.
And it is, I will say it's a little bit lengthier, but I never felt like I couldn't keep turning the pages, because the story kept going enough that I got through it. So it is a bit lengthier, so don't be intimidated by that if you pick it up, but it's worth the read. It's a good one. And I learned a ton about the Benedictine cloistered nun community that I would never know about.
That's great.
So, all right. And then let's go ahead and finish with our bonus pairings today, which are just a speed round of questions. You can just answer these really quick. And so they should be fairly simple. But where is your favorite place to read?
Favorite place to read is sitting near the water. So whether that's on the beach or by the pool or overlooking a lake, so whether I can, pause and look up out to the horizon.
Yes, that sounds beautiful. And then would you prefer audiobooks or hard copy books?
Oh, that's so hard, because I really, each one has its own special use.
Okay.
But probably hardcover, because it is permanence. I can look back onto my bookcase and recall that book.
Yeah. And then what is one book you have read that has changed your life?
Oh, well, probably would go all the way back to high school. And one of my best friends, she was also a reader. We shared that interest of pleasure reading during teenage years. Who did that? And she gave me Gone with the Wind.
Oh, I love that book.
900 something pages. And there's so much more in the book than in the movie. And, as I started to write, The Unlocked Path, I was feeling like, Eliza Edwards is probably somewhat inspired by Scarlett O'Hara, that's been sitting in the recesses of my mind for many, many years. The kind of the society girl that, for whatever reasons, has to overcome a lot of challenges to follow her true desires.
Yeah.
So probably Gone with the Wind.
Oh, I love that connection. That is so fun. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
What am I reading next? Well, of course, I have all my book club books, and I'm in 3 book clubs. I didn't mention that.
Oh my goodness.
I know, I'm a crazy person. I'm on an online one that's historical fiction only through Facebook. We meet the third Thursday, so we've got one coming up this week. And then I started another one through a social group here on Cape Cod. But so I've got those books on my radar, but there's so many new wonderful ones that came out this spring that are sitting on my bedside table. But probably the one I'm most looking forward to is Only the Beautiful by Susan.
Oh,
and
yes.
Susan's another one of my favorite historical fiction authors, and she tackles an interesting topic and issue of history. It's centered on the eugenics movement.
Oh, wow.
And not only, with the rise of Hitler in Europe, but the eugenics movement here in the United States.
Wow.
In the 20s and 30s. So I'm looking forward to diving into that and seeing how she handles that topic.
Yeah, wow. The cover of that is beautiful. I've seen it. Yeah. I didn't know that was what it was about. I saw it was receiving a lot of acclaim, but I just hadn't, like you said, I have so many books on my list that it takes some time to filter into the top. So, well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate your time, and I know it's precious, so I appreciate all you've given me today.
Thank you so much, Kara, and have a wonderful day, and look forward to connecting with you further.
Thank you so much for listening to my conversation today with Janis Robinson Daly. We'd love to hear what other books you might pair with her historical fiction book flight focusing on strong women communities at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information on today's flight and any other books that we talked about today. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are picking up next, especially if you have heard about the book on the show, please tag us. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. This is a brand new show, so if you enjoyed it, please head over to Apple Podcasts and give the show a review. Your review not only helps me, but it also helps the show reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure that you will not miss an episode. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.